will have 7 minutes for their presentations, which hopefully will leave us a few minutes at the end for a Q&A. When we get to the Q&A part of the program, if you could use the mics, that would be great. And I'm going to go on and introduce our first speaker, and I'll introduce the speakers as they come up. So first, I'd like to introduce Susan Davis. She's going to talk to us about great relationships. Susan is the interim head of acquisitions at the University of Buffalo.
Thank you very much, Maria. I don't think that mine is an innovative idea. It's not a project, but it is, as we learned earlier today, relationships are about power. So this is an empowering talk. And in case you don't believe in serendipity, as I was waiting to come on the stage, this lovely hat pin is here. And if you don't like my talk, sorry. So please excuse my odd sense of humor. Sometimes people find it just a little biting. But this session is not about humor. But fortunately, already at NASIG, we've heard some talks about relationships. Yesterday was more about relationships of things in the scholarly communication information chain. This morning we heard more about personal relationships or human relationships, and that is what I'm here to talk about. Next, oh, I have to do it. Where's the thing? Okay, yep. Okay. Oh, I knew that I would be heavy on the, all right, yes. Okay, this is correct. There we go. Okay, so why should you care about relationships? And so these are personal reflections. They in no way represent my institution. They don't represent NASIG. They represent me. So why would you care about having good relationships with colleagues, vendors, anyone? It's a way to improve service to your library customers, and by that I mean internal, better service to library users. There's some personal satisfaction in that you get meaning from your work, job satisfaction, and you might develop a professional reputation of some repute, or you might become infamous. It also builds a foundation for fruitful negotiations in the future. And again, the old quid pro quo, others will generally respond in kind if you treat them with respect, as we'll see on some of the future slides here. Okay. Now, if you're on the publisher-vendor side of the equation, why might you care about developing relationships with your library customers, library partners, or other partners in the information chain? So you can improve service to your library customers. It could enhance your company's reputation. You also will see personal and job satisfaction. It might increase your customer base. It might increase your sales and therefore profits. And similarly to what we saw with the librarian side, it's a foundation for fruitful negotiations in the future and the same quid pro quo. Obviously, for quid pro quo, you need two sides. So I was thinking about how to construct this, so I came up with these lovely, some words that would fit with the Priceless theme that you'll see in commercials also that was part of my, my title. So how do you work at building relationships? Well, you're polite, you're prepared, you're practical, you don't ask for the moon when you can't pay for the moon. And as we heard this morning now, we have to add another P, power. So we have power, but we also have to treat each other with respect. We need to be realistic. We need to be responsive. And obviously, there's a reputation potentially at stake here. So under the I's, we have integrity, insight. The C's, obviously, there were a lot of C words, and I have more that I've added since I gave this set to Maria this morning. So consensus is part of a relationship. You're trying to build consensus. You're treating each other with civility. There's compromise, cooperation, you're making connections. That's why you're here at the conference. Confidential, you do respect the other side's privacy. When certain information might be privileged, you don't go sharing it all over every listserv that you know of. And communication, I think we'll hear that in a subsequent lightning talk, that communication is key. And remember etiquette. Generally in our field, we're well educated, and we have that in common as a basis for discussion. We have enthusiasm, and if you are enthusiastic about working with the other party, again, that is like contagious. The other party can pick up on that and treat you in kind. And of course, excellence. Of course, this was only price, so naturally we have to go to the less, which is not actually less. It's just the rest of the word. So L, you have leverage. Sometimes you can leverage your relationships. They're lasting. They can be lasting. And this is a personal one for me, laughter. Humor can diffuse many situations. Obviously, you have to understand the appropriateness of the humor that you are sharing. So it might not be the first thing that you start out your relationship with. But the E, equity, that's a key principle for NASIG. Ethical, I think there was a session this morning on ethics. Empathy, the ability to look at something from the other person's point of view. And expertise, we all have expertise in something. And we are usually very happy to share that expertise with others. The S, you have support, satisfied at the end of any relationship. You should both be satisfied with where you are, and you're also trying to cultivate a relationship that is sustainable. Then we have to use common sense, so we're sensible, we're sharing an experience, and we are sensitive to others. So again, what's this have to do with NASIG? All right, NASIG is networking. For the veteran conference goers, you may remember something called networking nodes. That was my name for the discussion groups. So networking. Networking, is what NASIG is all about. That's why we're here. That's why we're all equal attendees here at the conference. You network in the bathroom line, the food line, the coffee line, sitting next to somebody here. If we were taking a bus together to something, we would be networking. Also, there's appreciation for the knowledge and skills of others in our community. And this is also a place to get answers from experts. S, support system. Again, you're developing a network of people who can support you in ways that you could not possibly imagine. And we did hear it earlier today too, standards. We are about standards. We have different kinds of standards. We have business standards and personal standards. Okay. The original slide did not have that extra tab space in there, so I blame it on someone else. Sorry. So for the I, we have integrity, insight. We're interested professionals. We're interested in each other. And we're also giving and generous of our time and knowledge. Then I had to go out. What's a talk without a good quote? So I'm sorry that I did not do research on this gentleman, but I really was struck by his quote. They may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So in my NASIG experience, I've been really fortunate. I've been to every conference, and in the beginning, as they say, I made connections with a lot of people who were instrumental in developing my career. And if you go back and research the NASIG newsletter, you'll see a number of items that I've written about, again, the history of NASIG, the founding, and there was a trip to the UKSG, which was infamous. But again, developed networks that then got me articles so I could receive tenure, appointments in committees. I also got a chance to be various officers in NASIG. I think I've never been a board member, but I've done all the other things. So this is crucial. I also wanted to mention, again, another story, not specifically, but the fact that your impact You might not even realize the impact that you're having on someone else at the conference. So you meet them the first day, and you're nice and you're helpful because you're a librarian and that's their first time and you're all helpful. And then you run into them before lunch and they're like, oh, do you want to go to lunch? And you go to lunch. And you weren't going to have a glass of wine or anything, but they're offering sangria at the restaurant. So you each have some sangria. And so we're going to remember that conversation for the rest of our working lives. And hopefully he's going to remember me. Anyway, I remember him. All right. So. And again, communication is key in that you need to effectively communicate, and you need to remember that we all, that is each of us, looks at the world through our own unique lens. And it's important to respect all the lenses in your dealings with others. And I know that for some people in my experience, I'm not talking about anyone here in NASIG, that they just are not able to put themselves in someone else's position. And that is, again, it's a human trait, we're all different, and you have to understand then how you would communicate issues with people that, seem to have that difficulty. But again, we all have different experiences, and we bring those to the table, and you need to be respectful about those, but you also need to first have some communication to learn about those issues. So again, you understand at your workplace how you're going to speak to your supervisor, your director, the staff that report to you. Those are different ways that we communicate, and we use those relationships to build for the future. And so the final slide, this was taken at last year's conference at the IndyCar Museum, and at the time, these 4 people, including myself, were all-timers. 3 of them are not here because they retired. We thought one was going to be here, the other woman with the pink shirt, but I didn't see her here, so there's just 2 of us left. But again, these folks, the gentleman who sort of cut off, he's a Kansas City Royals fan. He went to their fantasy camp. The one woman likes to read Richard Jury mysteries. The other woman is probably responsible for the great conference details because she probably negotiated the contract. So that's all I have to say, and thank you very much for your attention.
All right, next up, we have Courtney McAllister. Courtney is the Electronic Resources Librarian at the Citadel. Courtney?
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk a little bit about integrating technical services into liaison activities, which is a riveting topic. I'm sure you're all very excited. So liaison work in higher education is designed to establish and build relationships, to foster communication, and to ensure that library resources and services are in sync with our campuses. Didn't do that hard enough. Okay. But there are some identity politics involved in this, specifically which areas of your campus are assigned a liaison and who within your library personnel serve in that capacity. It's not always as straightforward as one might think. At my library, the Daniel Library, we had a system wherein only academic departments were assigned liaisons. Only reference and instruction librarians served in that capacity, which meant that only reference and instruction was really represented in a very narrow way. So the dilemma, as I like to say, is that the liaison program had yet to blossom. We had a stalk and we needed a flower. We had a very kind of narrow range of communication where reference and instruction talked to faculty about reference and instruction. And what we really needed was that liaison person to be a multifaceted mediator to facilitate really complex conversations that would tie together all of the library departments and services with both faculty and staff across campus. So because we had such narrow communication, we had some issues, not pointing any fingers, but there were some problems. We weren't communicating evenly or effectively across campus. We were completely oblivious to needs and usage beyond academic departments. We canceled the subscription and found out that the Career Center really loved it. We had no idea when we canceled it. Campus personnel were actually paying for their own personal subscriptions to things that we provided access to, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was heartbreaking to discover. Internally, the collections were an afterthought for our liaisons. I hope that you can't identify with this, but my sense is you probably can a little bit. Our reference and instruction librarians did not have a firm grasp on the collections as a whole, which I get. It's a really complex thing to try to break into. They had some niche areas where they had confidence, but they didn't have that big picture thinking. Their emphasis was much more on events and social things to try to advertise to faculty, things like guest speakers and programming. This led to some missed opportunities to advocate for the collection, to bolster usage, and to solicit feedback that would inform the future of the collection. So why was I so upset? Why does this matter to technical services? Well, so much of our budgets and our energy go into these collections. Selecting them, managing them, handling a license agreement can take months. And if the campus doesn't even know that we have these resources available, how can they be utilized, and what is our return on investment in that situation? And then how do we align our collections with campus needs if we don't have that healthy and robust communication? Okay. So saw some problems, tried to propose some solutions, and to do that we entered some uncharted territories. Change can be scary, but I think this paid off. I guess we'll see the long-term benefits later. So I was a newly appointed librarian in the fall, and I was inspired by Candace Dahl's article, which I strongly recommend to anyone who's interested read. She talks about the operational liaison as a way to apply the liaison model to non-academic departments to cultivate this, robust and holistic communication. So I was given the green light to become a liaison to our non-academic departments, such as the Career Center, Academic Support, the Registrar, ITS. So there was finally technical services representation in our existing liaison program. It was, as I like to call it, a foot in the door. Getting invited to my first meeting was a big deal. I circled it in my calendar 3 times. So I had some priorities, some strategies to kind of structure this involvement. Maybe these are things you already do. Maybe you already have a healthy technical services relationship with your liaison work. I hope that's the case. But for us, internal promotion of library resources was a major priority, improving the faculty and the liaison's familiarity with our collections. A liaison can't advocate for collections that they don't know about, so that was the first hurdle. Getting better feedback on resources and services was a close second. We do a lot of trials and then hear crickets, and we never know whether people liked it or not. So using liaison work to try to get more feedback is an ongoing strategy as well. And then internally, providing clarification on collections decision-making, trying to demystify the difference between a recurring cost and a one-time purchase and how that affects whether, no, that's not right. What have I done? Okay. I think I'm where I need to be. That was something that we needed to work on as well. I created an interactive matrix, which is linked to this slide if you would like to look at it in person, but basically to demystify that assessment process that people in technical services just kind of do automatically, but is very unfamiliar for a reference and instruction librarian. It covers things like, the quality of the metadata, what kind of metrics are available, what consortial discounts can we get, how does this support accreditation? Again, natural to us, but a very new kind of way of thinking for reference and instruction. So another thing we've done is tried to leverage this involvement with liaison work into gathering syllabi from all of the teaching faculty, which has been probably the most beneficial collaboration so far. It's mutually beneficial for instruction and collection development, which is why I think it's getting so much traction. I'm also regularly sharing usage data and other technical service statistics with the liaisons, things like, little infographics of most frequently searched terms in our discovery layer, lists of top used journals and databases, just to keep, usage trends on the forefront of their minds. So it's gone fairly well so far. It's still in a very fledgling state, but there have also been some unintended benefits. In the traditional liaison model, the focus is on academic departments, which are faculty-driven. Support departments are staff-driven. And I think as a result of our previous emphasis, staff were really left out of the picture. We didn't know what they needed. We didn't know what they wanted. And I hate to say that we were part of a larger issue in higher education of undervaluing our staff. And I think that formalizing the needs of staff through an operational liaison program has been really beneficial and hopefully will continue to reap some rewards. Speaking of the future, we are looking to continue improving communication between the liaisons, staff, faculty, and all library departments. We're trying to target staff needs, as I mentioned, and then we're tracking the impact on our usage and service statistics, trying to quantify how these new strategies have actually, led to some growth and some change. Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we have Travis Hewgley. He is the Director of Institutional Partnerships for Code Ocean.
Thank you, Maria. Okay. So thank you for having me. For those of you who don't know, Code Ocean is a Cornell incubated startup, and it was actually founded by Simon Adar. Simon was a spectral imaging engineer, and he had a project to actually analyze soil pollution from satellites. And so it was a multinational team working with German Space Agency, geological surveys. So it was a massive effort on his part. And so as he was going through the process, it really encountered two phases. The first phase was reading through hundreds of articles and trying to reproduce the research in those articles. Very difficult. Second phase was taking new data, applying it to an algorithm, and getting a different output. And so at this point, I think he realized that reproducibility is a major issue, but it wasn't just an issue unique to his team. This is something that's happening everywhere. And so some of you might have seen this study. It's kind of been making the rounds in some of the conferences. And what strikes me most about this is not necessarily that there are 1,500 people who think there's a reproducibility crisis on the left, but if you look on the right, scientists admit they have difficulty reproducing the work of other scientists. I think this is very easy to understand. But what really strikes me is they have difficulty across all disciplines reproducing their own work. And so the way we approach this at Code Ocean, we're trying to solve for this problem. So how many researchers or how many people who support research staff are in the room who deal with research staff? Anyone? Okay, some. Okay. So these are the steps it takes for a researcher to get one single piece of code up and running. And more today, we're seeing code behind a video, code behind that graph. And they're across all different disciplines, not just science and engineering. So step number one is actually finding that code, and often this involves contacting the PI. This can take days, weeks, months sometimes for the code to be shared. But at this point, the researcher has to ensure that the right hardware is set up on their computer. Then they have to import the right files, and then they're installing libraries and files over and over and over. And many dub this phase as dependency hell. Where one file is dependent on another file, is dependent on another file. This takes an enormous amount of research time, effort, and cost. And so finally, if the researcher is lucky, they can get to a point where they can look for errors, they can debug, and if they're very lucky, they can run and see the results. So we took this and said, is there an easier way? Can we eliminate a part of this? And for the technically inclined in here, we use Linux technology and Docker technology, but we're essentially taking this off the plate of the researcher to save time and money. In terms of how we approach it, I also like to look at it from the lens of what others say. So this is Lorne Campbell. He's at Western in Canada, and he says if he'd put his code in data in CodeOcean last year, the code would have run fine. And that's one of the guarantees of our executable repository. If it's on CodeOcean, that code is going to run today. It's going to run tomorrow. Okay. This is a librarian at Stanford. So Ashley likes to think of it as a container repository with cloud computing. So this is what I usually say it is to people. It's a computational reproducibility platform, also an executable repository. And 4 things to keep in mind. This is an open access platform. We have nearly 7,000 users using it right now across 250 academic institutions across the world. Researchers define and retain their own rights for all the research. It's interoperable, so anything can be downloaded at any time. It can be shared at any time. We essentially mint a DOI on this compute capsule. The compute capsule is metadata, code, data, results, all in one box. This is an example of a widget that's on one of the publisher's websites. This widget is an HTML file. Anyone can go on and drop this HTML code in any website. We have bloggers that do that currently, and this is one of the other applications for widgets, just like a YouTube widget. That is actually what the compute capsule looks like. For those of you who are not researchers or coders, it may not seem revolutionary, but we separate the code files from the data files. This is very important. It really highlights what makes this research unique. The middle window you see there is a coding window, and there's a results tab on the right where all you have to do is click run. We support any open source language and 2 proprietary languages. So essentially, you don't need your computer now to run code, to run research if you're doing something for research. We take preservation very seriously. We have a partnership with Clocks. We also preserve it on AWS S3, and we glaciarize it. And I talked about some of the languages that we support, and I think I'm nearing my time. This is essentially kind of why we're here. This is our mission statement, trying to increase research transparency and reuse in computational science and make a positive impact on scholarly communication. So if you have any questions at the end, I'd be glad to take them. Thank you so much.
All right, next up, Colleen Johnson. She is the research officer at the University of the West Indies Open Campus.
It's stuck. It's stuck on somebody else's. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Colleen Johnson, Research Officer, Open Campus Libraries Information Services, the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad. I am going to give you a brief overview of the UE and its movement from traditional scholarly publishing to our ebook web-based platform. It is an initiative, an in-house initiative between the UE Press and the Alma Jordan Library, St. Augustine. Finally, I'm going to show you how the UE Press is leading innovation in scholarly publishing in the Caribbean and its future. We are located in 17 countries across the Caribbean region. We provide teaching and learning services to over 49,000 students. 20,000 are distance and continuing education students. Our vision is to be an excellent global university rooted in the Caribbean. Our core values of diversity and student-centeredness are manifested in how we make our ebooks available to our students locally, and we are disseminating Caribbean scholarship internationally. Our online programs, the Open Campus, in our online programs, the Open Campus serves globally. Here are the links. We started as a fledgling college of the University of London in 1948 with only 33 students. And in 1962, we became an independent university. Currently, we have 4 campuses in Mona, Cave, St. Augustine, and our latest campus is the Open Campus, opened in 2008. We have 8 faculties. Our latest faculty is the Faculty of Sport. We also have faculties of medicine, engineering, law, included in those 8 faculties. So the development of the ebook platform is our agile attempt at disruptive innovation, described in Clayton Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. We refer to the UE ebook innovation as disruptive, as it disrupts our 1990s vision, the traditional publishing, scholarly publishing model. So, in moving, this is our timeline from 1992 to 2018. The UE Press was established as a not-for-profit traditional book publishing model in 1992. In keeping with changes, in keeping with changes in the global book industry, we established the ebook for Kindle model with only 5 ebooks in 2012. We improved in 2016 with the digital platform model using standard web technology. Web browser search by author, subject, title, available anywhere, anytime, on any device for free. 2018 is a snapshot of where we are today with over 340 ebooks available. But we did not do this in a vacuum. We had a mandate to support creation and dissemination of knowledge. And we can boast of best practice as we provide access to UWI's digitally preserved intellectual output. We also provide some resources in course development. So we can say that the UWI Press is an example of best practice at the University of the West Indies. And we have our own ebooks URL available to our 4 campuses. So we can say that we are using technology to improve the quality and quantity and impact of research, innovation, and publication. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek at our platform. We started with 200 ebooks at our 4 campuses in 2016, May. And through the UWI Press digital platform, it's hosted by the UWI Link. This is the UWI Library's Information Resources Discovery interface. And this is what our digital platform looks like. The Alma Jordan Libraries, they won an OCLC Award for Innovation in 2016 for this innovation. It's an in-house innovation. It's an initiative between the UWI Press and the Alma Jordan Library. So they actually won an award in 2016. And technological innovation is particularly important to the Open Campus, as it is the UWI campus that integrates the Caribbean region and delivers the most programs online. So, by September 2016, we added 50 more titles accessible by our faculty and students. So we can say that we achieved the objective of encouraging research and publication of Caribbean scholarship. We not only encourage, but we have achieved the objective of empowering and enabling our Caribbean scholarly community while enhancing regional cooperation and integration. As you know, the Caribbean is the disparate geographical area of many countries. And the University of the West Indies serves 17 countries in the Caribbean. And this is what our platform looks like. I have access to 5 ebooks, so you can see on the left-hand side it's 5, and this is an example of 2 of the ebooks. And bear in mind that this is an in-house initiative. This is not something that was contracted out. This is something that our technical staff worked on at the Alma Jordan Libraries and collaborated with the UWI Press to achieve. So, through this medium, we have been successful in expanding our reach for our Caribbean people, right? And opportunities to write, giving them opportunities to write and add to our cultural context in an e-format. So our cultural context is very rich, as we are influenced by many different European powers, Dutch, Spanish, French, British. So these are 5 ebooks available on our platform. And in terms of our future, we are not static, we are dynamic in our global outreach initiatives, while empowering our scholarly community. So across the Caribbean and beyond, we are aiming to reflect diversity in foreign languages, promoting the global reputation of the university. But we are not doing this in a vacuum. We are guided, forever guided, by our strategic plans. Our current strategic plan, 2017 to 22, speaks of agility, and the UWI Press enhances its operational efficiencies and financial profitability with its e-book visibility and accessibility, enhanced metadata for greater indexing and research engine methodology. What is the future of the UWI Press? A more viable publisher of regional scholarly content, worldwide partnerships with other presses and consultants, creation of user accounts. while attracting international institutions with Caribbean diaspora. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm available for questions.
All right. Next up, we have Matthew Jabali. He is the Electronic Resources and Serials Librarian at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs.
All right, hi, my name is Matt. I am going to be talking today about assessing demand for unsubscribed titles using 360 Link and Google Analytics. I've been the Electronic Resources and Serials Librarian at UCCS for about a year now. And one of the things I've started to think about is opportunity cost. All of our subscriptions that we pay for have a monetary cost, the money we actually pay, but how much does it cost us to not have the stuff that we're not paying for? One of the problems with figuring this out is that we have usage data for what we have, but we don't have usage data for what we don't have, or at least not as comprehensive. We do have a couple things, interlibrary loan data, which can tend to be anecdotal since not everyone will put in an interlibrary loan request, and often very few people will. We have patron requests, so the stuff that faculty actually ask us for, but again, very few people will ask for a library resource over the course of their student career, certainly. And vendors are starting to give us turnaway reports, but they're not available from all vendors, and a lot of our users never get to the vendors page in the first place. Instead, they get something like this. This is hard to see, but this is the landing page for when someone uses our link resolver and they get no results. What they do get is a button that allows them to put in an interlibrary loan request. Our data suggests about 10% of people who get to the screen will actually click that request button, and probably less even complete their information. But this would be a really great source of data, I had thought, and so especially because the open URL gives us a great amount of data, including the ISSNs. So wouldn't it be great if we had a turnaway report for this page? And so that's basically what I've created with the help of Tabby Farney, who's a librarian at my institution. She actually set this up before I even got there, but she has great instructions on how to set up Google Analytics onto your library websites and onto your link resolver pages, and this is a specific chapter. Again, we're looking at all the zero results lists, and specifically we use 360 Link, though if you have something else, it might work similarly. We have one click turned off, so everyone hits the landing page, no one goes straight to full text. So we get data on everyone. So the first thing I did with this data was I wanted a list of my top unsubscribed journals that people were trying to get to. Very briefly, to process the data, this hard-to-read piece of information is just a link of a list of all the URLs and how many times they've been hit. Luckily, this has a lot of really great data that I could process. So I took a year's worth of data. I isolated the ISSN. I just used Notepad++ and some really easy find and replace stuff to get a list I could put into Excel, just all the ISSNs. I counted up the number of hits for each ISSN and got my list of top unsubscribed journals. It started just with ISSNs, but then I was able to count up each one's pretty easily. I added more information from our serials manager, so get some basic pricing information if it was easily available. From Ulrich's or Serial Solutions, just searching, I looked at packages that might be a good place to find these journals too. My initial takeaways from the first time I did this, which was just a couple months ago, first I repaired a lot of tracking issues. A lot of the stuff that was on the top requested, but we didn't have, we actually did have, I just wasn't tracking it a lot of times from added access. There were packages that were tracked, but we didn't have all of our entitlements tracked correctly, and so I was just able to quickly increase access by doing my job properly. The next open access things often came up in that list too, so things that were freely available but not being found by the link resolver. We did add one new journal subscription. Right to the top of the list was pediatrics, and we had a couple years of free access to it, but it was a no-brainer just to subscribe to that right away. We also discovered the magnitude of demand for nursing and health sciences data, which made me then say, what's the easiest way that I can get more of this type of content really quickly? And so we have the CINAHL Plus with full text, a very popular nursing database at our institution. It's actually our most used database. And we had the option to move to CINAHL Complete. And in the past, before I got there, they had thought about this, but they didn't do it. There wasn't a lot of ILL data for it, and nobody had specifically asked for it in the nursing faculty. But I wanted to see if this method could be used to assess this whole package. And so I took a unique, I did an overlap analysis in Serial Solutions just to get all of the titles that we would get that we didn't have subscriptions for elsewhere. I exported all the ISSNs so that I could look them up in the Google Analytics interface. I started doing these one by one, which was a very long, slow process. And then I saw that Google Analytics allows you to just put in a regular expression search. So I was able to do one search with all the ISSNs to easily see that in the last year we would have had 444 requests where people got the no results, but instead if we had had this package, they would have gotten full text. And so that was enough to suggest that we really should purchase this, so we are going to start subscribing and adding the package. Next steps for this data, I want to follow up on this, see how that number, that indicator of usage actually turns into real usage. I'm hoping we'll have a lot more usage than just we had hits to that page. Having full text right in a database is better than having to go through a link resolver, and since we have so much traffic there, it could help. I want to refine and scale this. Right now, I have only looked at pure ISSNs for things that we have or don't have. I haven't looked at embargoes or anything like that, but that's another area I want to go to. And I really want to start integrating this into our process, looking up when someone has a request, how much demand we can really show is definitely there. And I want to start taking our wish list of tiles, especially for serials packages or individual serials, and weighing them against each other and things that we already have to see where the better value is. That's all.
Let's see, and last and not least, we have Molly Raynard. She is a subscription and purchasing manager at Auraria Library.
Oh, hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about how the process of going through our licenses and determining our permissions for several different projects helped me realize that we needed a much more cohesive method for sharing these terms interdepartmentally and also outside the library. Oh, clicker. Okay. So first, a couple years ago, as a grad student, I was asked to go through our licenses looking for permissions for alumni access. This is found in typically the authorized users clause of your licenses. I didn't find very many that allowed it, but the result was still positive because now we have a process whereby any alumni who inquires can request and be given remote access to resources such as this Project Muse, annual reviews, I think maybe Sage, a bunch of others, a handful of others. Am I doing the clicker wrong? Oh, it's just late. Okay, so one of my first major license-related projects as a Rare subscription and purchasing manager was to read all of our licenses for interlibrary loan permissions. ILL had just recently been incorporated into technical services, and we came to find out that we weren't actually lending electronic resources, which, Auraria is a commuter campus, and so primarily a commuter campus, and so that's about 90% of our collections budget that we weren't lending, which was a huge wake-up call for us. And so the first step was to go through our licenses. It was a bit more complex. I had to read the clauses very carefully for exactly what was being permitted. There were some print-only lending things. But it still nevertheless had a positive result that we started lending e-resources. It's a huge deal for us and for you all. Okay. So this past year, our electronic resources access librarian came to me and asked me to dig up some information on whether our contracts allow access for tangential user groups like affiliated researchers and visiting scholars. So yet again, I did a license review, and I looked again at the authorized users clause. Most of them allowed it, I found, either explicitly or more often implicitly, with phrases such as, any users with legal access to your premises or databases or whatever. And so I kind of just let her know that it was okay, she was okay to proceed, give her a few kind of more iffy, restrained clauses, but those even, open to interpretation, I'm pretty sure will be okay. Okay, so, Okay. So I have several more license reviews that I've done or I plan to do. I've only talked about the ones here that I've been able to kind of assess the results thoroughly and are absolutely completed. I have completed an ebook ILL review, but I haven't really been able to assess the results yet because the technology can be pretty complex with that system. I'm in the middle of an accessibility review, which is obviously extremely important for our campus right now. And then I'm also in the future planning a review of text and data mining clauses to see which ones have those. So there are really two sides to this story in having to perform a license review. There's a data management side, which is kind of just this internal issue within technical services, like, are we tracking things correctly? Do we have a workflow problem? Do we, are we able to track our license permissions, in-house? But there's also this kind of bigger picture problem, which is communication between license negotiators and the stakeholders, such as subject librarians, faculty, students who are affected. So I found within my library, at least, there was kind of a disconnect. Our licensing processes were really improving. We have 3 full-time staff members now reading licenses as they come in, like all 3 of us. So we're really making wins. We're negotiating terms. We're getting these great deals. But if that's just kind of stuffed in a drawer somewhere, I kind of started to think, what's the point if our patrons can't really benefit from these, if our faculty don't know about them. So I decided to try to share these terms outside of our department. And here are my attempts so far. They're hit or miss, but they're just what I've tried so far. Oh, yeah, we're already on that slide. So I went to the collection development meeting and gave a very similar presentation to what I gave in the first half. So the points I really wanted to drive home here were, can we advertise these terms better within our campus? ILL, authorized users, who can use what, and ebook lending. And then I really wanted to know, because I can't figure this out in my position as just on the acquisitions team. What do patrons want from us? I hate to think of the fact that maybe there's patrons out there who really want text and data mining, but they don't know how to get that to me, or the subject librarians never tell me, and so I never negotiate it into our licenses. So finally, I've also attended some interdepartmental committees and joined some of them to just kind of get a technical services personnel kind of out there a little more. So I requested to join the User Experience Committee. I'm the only second technical services staff member on that committee in our library, and I'm the first acquisitions personnel ever to join. And so it's great being on that to see, kind of just, hear feedback from them, and then I can also be really proactive in my upcoming license negotiations if I, hear stuff through the grapevine that way. And then Auraria is a tri-institutional campus. We have a tri-institutional accessibility committee, and they meet at the library about monthly. And so I came and gave them a presentation very condensed into my accessibility review and what I'm doing that way. And I was surprised to hear, and I think they were surprised, to hear, the kind of procurement and licensing side, because they really kind of deal with, is this working now, for this patron who needs this to work? And so it was good for them to experience, or to hear about, how we can kind of stop these problems at the starting, from the ground up, before they become a problem for patrons. So that's what I've done so far. I hope to do a lot more, but that's my current progress, so thanks.